Phyllis's next guest is Barnett Bain, an award-winning filmmaker, author and teacher known for exploring themes of creativity, connection and the human spirit. His film credits include Oscar winner What Dreams May Come, Outstanding TV Movie Emmy nominee Homeless to Harvard, and Eckhart Tolle's Milton's Secret. Bain's new book is How to Be a Friend in an Unfriendly World. Bain's book grew out of a Columbia University master's course he created for psychologists and offers a heartfelt guide to practicing friendship in all its forms. The book has been described as a lifeline for difficult times. You are watching Profunda TV with host Phyllis Haynes.
I must tell our audience that I have the privilege of interviewing someone who I adore. And I have to ask you, why this particular subject?
Well, I don't have to tell anyone that these are awkward and rushed times, frantic times. I don't know anyone that isn't feeling this kind of constant buzz of going. And I found it difficult personally to be centered, to find some calm in all the craziness and all the crazy weather. So that it began with that, and then there were a number of other episodes that intruded. I didn't embark on this subject because I was very good at it. I didn't have it down. It's not like I was an expert in it. But some things happened in my personal life that happened with my daughter. I'll get into that in a second, and that made me give some thought to how I show up for people that matter to me, or and how I don't show up for people that matter to me. And I wanted to make some changes, and so I began to give some thought to it, and do some reading and do some journaling and ask a number of questions. But I'll roll back. My daughter, a few years back now, went off to college, and when she came home, we went out to dinner together, just me and her, my favorite thing. And she was excitedly unpacking her experience away from home. And I found myself interrupting her with all kinds of questions, and some of them I hate to admit were pretty judgmental. Did I like who she was spending her time with? Did I approve of her course load? Did I? And she called a red alert on it. She said, what is this? Who are you? All of a sudden, this is not how you showed up for the first years of my life. What happened to this unconditional acceptance? And I understood a couple of things in that moment. First is there's no such thing as unconditional acceptance, just that she hadn't run into the conditions and I hadn't been aware of the conditions. And the second thing, and most important, the primary thing, is that I felt how deeply I had hurt her, and how deeply I had betrayed a certain relationship and a trust with one of the very most important people in my life, and vice versa. And I didn't want that to happen again. And so I wanted to become better at being relational. And then not long after that, something else happened. I came across a street performer in the park, and he had these two sticks and a big dish of soap, and there was a length of yarn between the two sticks, and he would dip them in, and then he would make these amazing soap bubbles, and they would twist and turn, and then it was captivating, just captivating. And then his pièce de résistance, he created this bubble, and it was so enormous that he could step right into it, and he was fully enveloped in this bubble. And I had this instant awareness that this is what I do. I've created this bubble of my thought and my belief and my assumptions about life and my fixed ideas about life and my values. And I live inside that bubble. And I relate to others. My daughter, specifically, it began with that. And as long as others reflect my own bubble, I'm great with it. And like Narcissus, who saw his own reflection and fell in love with his own reflection, unbeknownst to him that it was looking at his own reflection. I realized very much like Narcissus, those that reflect my values and my cultural conditioning and my social, religious, racial, spiritual conditioning, those I make real. And to the extent that they don't, I either react to them or resist them or judge them or make them invisible, maybe worst of all. And so I didn't want to, I wanted to grow. It became the, the impulse to grow and change. I wasn't going to abide by that. And that was the beginning of the book. Long way around to say that was the beginning of the book.
So let's just go back to this courageous topic of friendship because there have been some great books written on this subject. I thought this was very courageous on your part. Um, I loved every minute of the book.
Mm.
I have to say, I can't think of a more important look into myself than this book. So even though you call it How to Be a Friend in a time when friendship is difficult, how do you why did you choose that title? I know people don't usually ask authors that question, but after reading your book, I have to ask you, what has this got to do with friendship?
Wonderful. That's a wonderful question. So I chose the title in deference to Marcus Trulius Cicero, who 2,000 years ago wrote, having suffered the loss of his lifelong friend, wrote a book called How to Be a Friend, in which he investigated and diagnosed what was wonderful about his relationship with his deceased friend. And I thought it remarkable that um, friendship today is as mysterious as it was 2,000 years ago, and that as little understood, and that perhaps the climate that we operate in is less conducive now to cultivating an authentic friendship than it was 2,000 years ago. And so I thought, well, this subject deserves revisiting, and and I'm grateful to Cicero for supplying me with the grist for my mill and the title. We The biggest distinction that I took from Cicero, I don't specifically dive into it in my book because I think it's certainly been well covered by Cicero and others. But the one of the critical elements of being a friend is that there is nothing transactional about it. In a pure friendship, it means that there are no hidden contracts, explicit or implicit, and that the friendship is given freely. And in that way, it's I think it's unique among relationships, because even in a marriage or in a family relationship, there are these obligations. And in a pure friendship, in the highest expression of friending, there is commitment, but there is no indebtedness. So it's obligation free. The commitment is an act of generosity. And I thought that was a really beautiful place to start from. So it's about forging a space in which the parties to the friendship can be with each other and witness each other and become, in effect, mirrors for each other in order to what? In order to love and in order to grow. And so the fertile soil of that is the ability to be with somebody, not to try and fix them, not to try and jump in, not to offer to help, but only when asked. It's to the greatest gift you can give in a friendship is presence. It's just it's just presence. Um,
But I have to say, as you speak, it sounds like a very high level of involvement that you're talking about. That to get to the point where there are no contractual obligations in a friendship and there are no expectations and you're just being there, I think that it takes an understanding of being present. So let's go back to the beginning again of your book, because I thought you were going to give me this answer. You say this wonderful paragraph in the book that as a filmmaker and director and screenwriter, and you've discovered that in every single form of story, everything comes down to relationship.
yes.
I thought that was a phenomenal statement.
Well, filmmaking taught me that story is the language. First of all, it taught me that story is the language of the soul. But it also taught me that every scene, whether it's on screen or in life, is, as you remind me, about relationship. Who's listening, who's not, who's awake, who's asleep. And so this insight grew out of many decades of exploring how we are the directors of our own stories, most often without realizing it, most often unconsciously and reactively, and how friendship becomes both the plot line and the medium for life itself, how relationships become both the plot line and the medium for relationships themselves. So, to your observation earlier that I began by describing an, a high level of friendship as involving a qualities of deep insight. And that's true. That's true. Friendship is developmental, and life itself is developmental. So I assert that we are the directors of our own stories, but the majority of our choice making is like an iceberg. Most of the motives for our choice making lies below the surface of things, and part of any relationship is the possibility of any relationship is that we can become increasingly aware of what lies below the waterline of our choices. We love and we grow in our own self awareness and in our own ability to relate to others by excavating who we really are. And I think that's the life story of all of us. Why do we behave in the ways that we behave, and how do we behave in relationship to others? I mean, the relationships become mirrors. In some ways, they become opportunities to reveal where I have certain fixed ideas, where I'm defending instead of connecting. Why am I defending? Why do some experiences trigger me? Why do I, can a friend say something messy to me without me flinching or wanting to fix? And all of these indicate kind of growth edges, and that is the beauty of all relationships. And in a friending relationship, there is a commitment, and it becomes especially powerful when it's a consciously undertaken commitment. It doesn't have to be expressed, but when one is aware enough to commit to a relationship, then when it gets messy, and sometimes it's even tougher when it's beautiful, we don't withdraw. We stay.
Why is it tougher when it gets beautiful?
Well, we don't have the same kind of cultural conditioning. We don't have a lot of models of what it takes to show up when it is gloriously beautiful. There are so many options on the menu for for how we deal with challenges, how we deal with crises, how we deal with problems, and we have a certain kind of expectation of challenge and difficulty, much more so than we come with a default expectation for things are wonderful and things are going to be optimistic and they will work out.
You offer a quote from Goethe, which blew my mind. I had never heard this particular quote. We will share it on the screen at some point. But the point is in this quote that you realize that you are the source of all things, that you are the cause in the universe.
I had that insight very early, very, very early. I was a very young boy. And it's not an insight that is particularly original. I know a lot of people have these moments of insight as children. I was dreaming at night, and I woke up from my dream in the dream. I became aware that I was asleep and dreaming. They call that lucid dreaming. And suddenly, my attitude towards the street that I was walking on, the gravel underfoot, the people that were going by, the people that I was dealing with, the traffic, the buses that were going by me. Suddenly, I had a whole different relationship to them all, because they were at simultaneously separate from me, and I was aware that I was dreaming. And so some part of me knew that at some level we were all one thing. And it fundamentally changed. It opened a recalibration of how I related to everything. Now, I woke up from that dream, and life comes at you in the way that it comes at you, and life has continued to grind away at that insight constantly, and yet, even though it's not as alive in me as it was at that moment, it is it continues to flicker there like the pilot light on a gas range. It never has never been quite fully extinguished. And so when I come across something like the Goethe quote and others, it excites me. It excites me, and I think it creates a lens that allows me to exercise when I remember. It allows me to be more patient, more compassionate, and it helps my bubbles. I talked about the soap bubble. My bubbles that are built from my beliefs and my fears, and now algorithms too, that keep me comfortable. It helps me be more tolerant of worldviews and others whose world looks different from mine, because someplace there's that little pilot light, that little flicker of awareness that we're all one thing. We're one thing.
All right, I'm going to ask you a very pedestrian question, but I've got an award-winning film director, writer, screenwriter, producer right in front of me. So it seems to me that this awareness that you have would make you less effective in the film business, which is based on the conflict between characters and the struggle in life, that your compassion and seeing the oneness would interfere with your abilities. Does it at all?
I am aware that there was a time when when I had an intention. I was a younger man, and my intention was I'm going to just make stories that are in response to it to what you're pointing out, that are conflict free. And as a practical matter, that doesn't work out. That is like being in, my dad was a butcher. So that's like being in the retail meat business in a community only of vegetarians. So that's not effective. But as I grew older and maybe a little wiser, I understood something else. I live in a world and in a culture that operates as a contest. It is about the individual making their way in the world, and it's a world of conflict. And developmentally, to leap past that is not helpful to anyone. I mean, first we have to, we have a thing in our Judeo-Christian culture called the Ten Commandments. Don't kill people, don't steal from people, don't commit adultery. These basic, these are like handrails. If we if we were if we were emotionally, mentally, spiritually, psychologically advanced beyond that, then we could go to Christ's ultimate commandment, just love. But we're not there. So we still need the handrails. We still need to know, how do I self regulate when something the same, similar, or familiar to something from my past that I'm not necessarily aware of is triggered by something that comes up by chance word or experience in my life that triggers an old memory that is below the waterline of my awareness, and I suddenly lash out like a viper. There are handrails that are available to us in order to meet life at the developmental level that we're at, so we can respond to that. It's not helpful to say just love when we have all kinds of, to use a computer analogy, all kinds of programs that are running that mitigate against just love. We don't really know what it is to be loved. In order to love, you have to know, first of all, the programs that you're running. And so for me to make films that dispense with all the programs that are running, first of all, I personally am not I don't have that gift. So I can't make a film that is more aware than I'm aware. And I am not that aware. So I make films and write books and tell stories that reflect my own awareness and my own desire to grow and to become more loving. And if I was ultimately loving, who knows what kind of films I'm making. But right now, I can only make what I know. That's a sort of rambling response. I think
No,
you're
no, not at
asking the
all.
question.
Not at all rambling. Very important answer to me. So, you talk about some of the competitive nature of human beings. You talk about Schadenfreude. Now, I think that's a good place to. I can't give away your whole book because I want people to read it. But Schadenfreude, talk about what that is and why do we have this?
Schadenfreude is a marvelous, it's a marvelous word that from the German language that expresses some. We have no comparable word for it in English. It is a word that is meant to describe a state where people perhaps do not wish the best for somebody else. So, as an example, and I'm familiar with this. I you know, I some and I'll I'll confess that when I hear that a friend of mine who's doing the same business is like has a huge success, is making a film, and I want to make a film, and they're making a film, and I would like to say that I'm thrilled for them, but the truth is that sometimes I'm jealous. And sometimes I even think, God, I hope it falls through or it's not going to be that successful. Now, I don't say that with any pride. It's a shameful thing to admit, but it is very much a part of our human condition. So a friend, something wonderful happens to a friend, and on the surface, we have one response, and down underneath, we feel that somehow we're diminished or we are envious or we're jealous and so rather than having the capacity to self vision myself operating at the same level of success and abundance, I may not be aware that I don't feel I can operate at the same level of success and abundance, but what I can do is wish that they were a little less. So that's Schadenfreude, and it is it's a natural developmental part of what it is to be human. There's this wonderful story of an Aesop's fable of the fox and the grapes. Do you know it? In
Don't recall it.
in the fox and the grapes, there's a fox that comes to a vineyard. And between the fox and the vineyard is a stone wall, a high stone wall. And so the fox takes a run at that wall and it hits that wall hard and slides down and backs up and takes another run and leaps and hits the wall hard and slides down. And after a few runs at this, the fox says they were probably sour.
Hmm.
Who needs them? They're sour. So, what that illustrates to me is it's not quite Schadenfreude, but it's adjacent. What that illustrates to me is if I cannot be omnipotent, then I can pretend to be omniscient. If I'm not going to be all powerful, I can be all knowing. And Schadenfreude is similar. If I can't be all powerful in order to grow, in order to self express in the same way um, that perhaps a friend is. And so instead of being inspired to greatness, I reduce the other. If I don't feel that I can be omnipotent, then I can be omniscient. Well, I know better.
But in your book, we will begin to wrap this up and say what we reach in your book is an understanding of
Hmm.
how, at least, to recognize this in ourselves and become a better friend as a result of that recognition.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. We have to become aware. And when we become aware of these programs again that are operating underneath, like Schadenfreude, I'd rather be all knowing. If I not rather, if I can't be, if I don't have a self image of possibility, then I will reduce others to shoehorn into what's possible for me. So as we become aware of ourselves, we gradually we stop trying to compete in the same old way and start trying to understand. So this kind of awareness It dissolves the need to be better than. It dissolves the need to be right. And it allows us to stay connected even when we disagree, to hold complexity without collapsing into competition. It turns opposition and competition into dialogue.
May this book of yours go to every single person, especially in our country,